Let's call to read anything. Prayer will be from First Corinthians, sorry, not First Corinthians, First Timothy 5. Let's go to verse 17. Through 20. Let the elders who rule be counted worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in the word and doctrine. For the scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain, and the labor is worthy of its wages. Do not receive an accusation against an elder, except from 2 or 3 witnesses, those who are sinning rebuked in the presence of all, that the rest may also fear.
I didn't give a scripture because I knew it would be done. It's all part of the plan. Good morning. Straight to everybody on this morning, as usual. You could have been anyone in the world who chose to be here, and I'm glad you're here. I know God's glad you're here. A few quick announcements. All those who will plan to be at the YMCA for the Bible study, let me know what time and day works for you, and I'll schedule that in the meeting. I talked to the Y, and they're all good with it. It's no problem. So let me know what works for you, and we'll give you a good time and we'll go study. If you got an email yesterday from the church to make an account, to register an account, good. Hopefully you did that. If you didn't do that, do it. Go through and follow all the steps and do that. Download the app. You know, you usually don't hear this in worship, but pull your phones out and download the Pray It Over app. This is the app that Brother Charles built. He's not here, he's at VTP. But download that app. It's called Pray It Over. And what this app is going to do is going to allow for us to, everything's in your bulletin. All of that will be in the app. You'll be able to make prayer requests. You'll be able to get notifications to your phone about any changes or updates. You'll see events that are posted that you may forget that you saw on the bulletin board. Those things will be in the app. All that stuff. If you need to contact someone, there'll be a walking directory. You might not have their number. They might not have their number published with their emails in there. All this stuff is going to be through the app. It's almost like a social media, specifically for the church in our congregation. Charles has done a great job building it. He's still working on it here and there, changing little things. So as you use it, maybe your experiences that are telling you need to have something else added. You talk to Charles about it, you can make those changes as needed. And he'll explain it more. We'll do a demonstration for it all whenever he comes back. So keep all those who are at UTB in your prayers. They have a decent sized group there as they travel back this week and as they are there being this morning. Also keep Joel in your prayers. He's not feeling very good this morning. And keep Stephen in your prayers as he is still in Arkansas with his mom after losing his father. So keep all of them in your prayers. All right. We are in Timothy. First Timothy. I was going to get it. It's coming. Maybe. We're First Timothy. So far, we've studied chapters 1 through 4. Now we're on chapter 5. Chapter 1, Paul opens up with, "I'm writing these things to you because God has told me to. By the commandments of the Lord, the Holy Spirit is guiding him. By the commandments of God in Jesus Christ, our Savior," he says, "I'm writing these things to you, Timothy." What he's writing to Timothy in chapter 1 is that you need to charge them. They teach no other doctrine. The reason why you need to do this is because you're going to be teaching people who don't know the truth. So in teaching people who don't know the truth, you need to know what you're talking about and not allow them to be confused about others sharing different thoughts or contrasting things, but also claiming to be teachers. He says that in order for you to be able to do this properly, you need to have love from a pure heart, a sincere faith, and a good conscience. He goes on in chapter 2, and he says, if you plan on doing this properly, you need to then pray for all men, especially those who are in a position of authority, that you can lead a quiet and peaceful life. The reason why you need to do that is so that you can fulfill God's desire, which is for all men to be saved. And the way that they can do that is by coming to the knowledge of truth. The second half of chapter 2, he's going to discuss the role that men and women play within the church. Although they are different and the authority is different depending on the role, the value is the same. And he discusses that all throughout the end of chapter 2, which leads directly into chapter 3. When you get to chapter 3, he then talks about the role that men and women will play in the eldership as well as deacons. And so he talks about how qualifications need to be met and what qualifications need to be met for the elders and the deacons and the wives. He goes into chapter 4, and he gets to chapter 4, he lets us know that some people are going to leave faith. Some people are going to be led astray. Some people are going to go away from what they've known to be true, to follow after the doctrines of demons, the doctrines of the devil. And he says that we need to be those who are careful not to apostatize like those who have done this. He says the way that you can do this is by exercising yourself towards godliness, because godliness is profitable in all things. He then tells Timothy, let no man despise thy youth, but be an example to the believers. That leads us directly into chapter 5. The very first thing that we're going to see in chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, lost my head. Because do not rebuke the older. Let no man despise our youth, but be an example to the believer. And he gives a list of things to be an example to the believers in. And then he goes into here in chapter 5, but don't rebuke an older person. Let's read verses 1 and 2. You guys are not going to be able to see that. It was white. I don't know what happened, but it was white. A little different. But you're in luck. Open your Bibles, and it's there. First Timothy chapter 5, we're going to start with verse 1. I promise you, it's there. If it's not there, you got some problems. Might need to buy the Bible. First Timothy chapter 5 says, do not rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father, younger men as brothers. You know, this is not saying that you can't correct those who are older, but the way that you do it matters. Do not rebuke. The word rebuke means to show a sharp disapproval or a sharp correction even. This is the idea of being harsh in the ways you're going to go forward. Sometimes it calls for that. If you were in my Ames class this morning, Ames was very clear, very direct when he says that they had committed. He didn't beat around the bush. He told them exactly what they did wrong and how it was wrong and why they needed to repent of those things. Sometimes that needs to be the case, but sometimes it needs to be more respectful, and it needs to be an expectation, a strong encouragement. You go to these people and you talk to them about what they've done wrong, you let them know that they need to make some changes. And in making these changes, it's going to promote a better and more godly lifestyle. And you do so with a very gentle heart and a gentle conversation. But Paul tells Timothy, as a young man, who's being an example to the believers, whenever you go to those who are older than you, go to them with a certain reverence and attitude. And as you do that, don't rebuke them, but exhort them. He says, we do it to the young men as well. Treat them like brothers. Don't be those who are the big brothers that are going to bully, but those who are going to go and give them a good, stern talking to, but let them know that they are loved and how they can correct what they've done wrong. He follows along with this into verse 2. He says, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters with all purity. Do the same thing for the older women as mothers, and for the young women as sisters, if you did for the older men as fathers, the younger men as brothers. He has one extra thing in there, with all purity. He literally is speaking to the physical purity, keeping yourself pure in a sexual way, not letting yourself be put into compromising positions. Maybe you see preachers do this all the time. I have this practice, but if I'm at the building and we have a visitor come in and it's a woman, she needs help and she wants to discuss the things, I don't stay here by myself. I keep my wife and my kids nearby, or I'll ask another brother to sit in with us, but I don't allow for the situation to be even construed as something other than what it actually is. Make sure that the room continues to stay pure, that there's no things that are said that are out of hand or out of line. Also, if you plan on ministering to these women, you're going to do so in a respectful way and a reverent way, giving them honor. You also have to do so in a pure way, so that they don't even feel as if you're making any advances towards them. Do not rebuke those who are older, but rather encourage them, strongly encourage them to make changes and to make corrections in their lives. He goes on. Also,
try it now.
all right. Good. chapter 5, verse 3 through 16. Honor true widows. Honor true widows. Verse 3 says, honor widows who are really widows. He's going to further explain this, so I won't stick on this very long. But the honor part is literally take care of them from a reverent and respectful position, physically and spiritually. That means that whenever they have needs in the spiritual realm, you're going to meet those needs. Pray on their behalf, anoint them with oil, do all that you can to make sure that they are studying and learning the word of God, but also physically. Whenever they need food, whenever they need clothing, whenever they need housing, you're going to also provide those things. Not Timothy himself, he can do it individually, of course, but this is pertaining to the church. We're going to see this more as we keep reading. He says, honor these widows who are really widows. He's going to tell us the difference between those who claim to be widows versus those who are actually widows. I'll talk about that in one of the next few verses. Look at verse 4. Verse 4. The verse says, but if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show piety at home and to repay their parents. For this is good and acceptable for God. You know, Paul says a mouthful here, and maybe it doesn't seem like it, but first and foremost, he says, if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first show piety at home and repay their parents. If you have any family who can't take care of you, let them take care of you. What that care is going to look like is going to vary. Maybe it is providing you to live in a home. Maybe it is you come and stay with those people. Maybe it's that they put you in care of a home health nurse who come by every day. But whatever the case may be, they're going to do what level of care they can do. Whether it be your children doing this who have the ability to provide, or your grandchildren who have the ability to provide, they are going to do this as a service to you. Two things to note here. One, parents and grandparents, you should be treating your children in such a way that they feel like they have something to repay you in the time when you are needing them to take care of you. You should be taking care of your children and your grandchildren in such a way that whenever you are in need of care, they can look back and say, look at what mom and dad did for me, look at what grandma and grandpa did for me. I want to do the same for them. The way you live right now in your children and grandchildren's lives matters. The way you treat them right now matters. And then number two, those of you who have parents and grandparents who never were part of your life, never helped you do anything, never paid any attention to you or gave you any kind of help whatsoever, this does not remove your responsibilities to them to do good. Our responsibility is to do good to all men, especially the household of faith. Our responsibility is to love your neighbor as yourself. Our responsibility is to treat others how we want to be treated, not how we were treated. So you are still called to take care of these people as much so as you are able to do so. Paul says, if you have the opportunity, if you have the ability, you're responsible to take care of these people. He goes on and he says in the second half of verse 4, for this is good and acceptable. It sounds a lot like what he said in Romans chapter 12. Go there real quick. Romans 12, I'm going to look at verse 2. 1 and 2, of course, are verse 2. Verse 1 is going to tell us that we need to be those who are living sacrifices, those who are holy, those who are acceptable to God. If you know when you read verse 1, there's commas there. It's not saying you should be a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God. It's saying you should be a living sacrifice, you should be holy, and you should be acceptable to God. It's 3 separate things that you should be, although they all be together as things that you do as a person of God. And that is your reasonable service. Then he says in verse 2. In verse 2, he says, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Taking care of those who are in need, those widows in your family who are in your life, it is good and acceptable, and it is also the will of God. I love how Paul is going to put it together in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, that being good and acceptable in the sight of God is also the will of God. So we are going to take care of those who are widows in our lives, and we are doing the will of God. Go on to verses 5 and 6. 1 Timothy 5, verses 5 and 6. He started in verse 3, he says, take care of those who are really widows. Now in 5 and 6, he's going to talk about those who are true widows. He's going to get more in depth with that when we get to verses 9 and 10, specifically verse 10, and describing some of the qualifications for those who are to be considered widows under the care of the church. But look at verses 5 and 6. It says, now she who is really a widow and left alone, trust in God, and continue in supplication and prayer night and day. But she who lives in pleasure is dead while she lives. Paul here is saying those who are really widows and who are left alone. There's two classes of widows you can say here. There are those who truly are in need of the help of the church, and those who are living in a lack of luxury and can do well on their own. Maybe this puts you in the mind of James chapter 1, verse 27. This is the first mentioning of it, of Paul saying that we should be those who are taking care of our widows. But James chapter 1, verse 27 tells us, "Pure and undefiled brothers before God is take care of the widows and the orphans, to keep ourselves as wise in the world." He goes on, he says, those who are really widows are going to be those who are trusting in God and continuing in supplication and prayers night and day. A general rule that we should have, and a general rule that these widows would have, is that regardless of where we find ourselves, whether in a good time or a bad time, we want to pray to God. And as we do that, we continue in those supplications and prayers and intercessions and giving of thanks. We're going to have God and provide for our needs. Matthew 6 and verse 33. The way in which this is going to be done is by way of the Lord's church. It's not some mystical thing. I think that whenever we read a verse like Matthew 6 and verse 33, it says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." Think that maybe God is going to have a moment where he is going to fly a plane across our yard and drop down some supplies. It doesn't work that way. It's going to work through God's providence, putting people in places and positions in our lives that help us with the things that we have need for. And in this particular case, it's going through the church, and the money which the church is collecting, even here this Sunday, is going to be used to take care of the church, in particular in chapter 5 here, the widows. He goes on and says, "But she who lives in pleasure is dead while she lives." This is going to speak to the unfaithfulness of some widows. He'll talk more about this in detail in the coming verses, so hold on to that. Go to verse 7. Verse 7. "And these things command that they may be blameless." This is to be taught to everybody. You know, this is not just a widow thing. Yeah, of course, he's talking to the widows and he's talking about what they need. He's speaking directly to Timothy and how he's going to uphold these things. So everybody needs to know this. Everybody needs to know this so that we can go about doing the right thing. He's going to come back to this in just a second to say that if we are doing this properly and widows are being taken care of properly, then it won't be a burden on the church to take care of the ones who actually need the care. So hold on to this as well. Go on to verse 8. Verse 8. He says, "But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those in his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." I thought this was an interesting way of saying things, and maybe you've never taken note of this, but he who doesn't provide for his own, and especially those in his household, what would be the difference? Is the question that comes to mind. How can someone belong to you, but they not live with you? This is the idea of care of those who are outside of your home. Once you move away from your parents, that doesn't mean that they no longer are going to have any sense of responsibility for you. They're going to do all they can to help you. If you've been young before, and I know you have, and you just moved out of home, and you're having these struggles, maybe paying your rent, maybe your lights are about to be turned off, maybe you just need some money for gas, if you're in college, you need some money for food, you're not quite getting it done, and you call your parents and say, "This is what I'm going through, this is my struggle," and say, "Don't worry about it, we can help you out with this." You're not in their home anymore, but they still feel a sense of responsibility for you, for you are theirs. A person who's not providing for his own, especially those who are still living in his house, could be an issue there. They deny the faith, they are worshiping an unbeliever. I posted this quote on my Facebook a few days ago, but it's a fantastic quote. And this should be our mindset when it comes to providing for those who are in our lives and ones that we are responsible to, whether they live in our house or not. This is from Newport J.D. White. He says, "One of the most subtle temptations of the devil is his suggestion that we can best comply with the demands of duty in some place far away from home." I'm going to stop right there for a second. Sometimes we put it in our minds that the best thing that we can do on behalf of our home or the Lord's church is to go out and get things done and then bring it back. And sometimes we never actually make it back. Sometimes we think to ourselves, the best thing that we can do for the Lord's church is go to evangelize in some part of our country, as if our neighborhood doesn't need the gospel. Sometimes we think the best thing that we can do for our home is to go outside and work a job that pays well so we can provide certain things for our home when our home is a place that needs all the work. The best thing that we can do is to do the work in our home first and then take care of everything else outside of it. Second, he goes on and he says, Jesus always said, do the next thing, begin at Jerusalem, etc. The path of duty begins within our own home, and we must walk in it. We must walk it on our own streets. The best thing that we could possibly do is to take care of our own in our homes first, and everything else to follow. Anyone who's not doing that is worse than an unbeliever. They have denied their faith. And look at verses 9 and 10. He's going to give us these qualifications for the true widows, those who are really widows. And I know this may seem like a thing that's, what does it have to do with us now, in the 21st century? You're talking about widows. We still have widows today. We still have widows, some who's married and they have a son that's left behind. We still have some who are working. We still have widows who can provide for themselves and have no need for care. We still have widows who have their children taken care of them. We do have some widows who do need the aid of the church. And the question is, are we doing our job and properly caring for them as the body of Christ to make sure that their needs are met? We're seeing the blueprint for that was set way back in the first century and carried forward even till now. So Paul's going to say in verses 9 and 10, here's some things to look out for those who are in need and deserving of the care of the church. I'm going to make some promises about this. So do not let, verse 9 and 10, do not let a widow under 60 years old be taken into the number, and not unless she has been the wife of one man, well rewarded for good works, if she has brought up children, if she has lodged strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has relieved the afflicted, if she has diligently followed every good work. Okay, let's break down some qualifications here. Do not let a widow under 60 be taken into the number. I would just say here, Paul is not going to say if you're 59 years old, and your husband has died, and you've done all these other things, you can't get any help. But he's given a benchmark to look forward to. And we're talking about those who are going to be qualified for the care of the church. This is a good place to start. This is not going to be so strict that no one can ever receive help unless they meet these exact qualifications. But this is going to help weed out a lot of those ones who are nowhere near doing as they should in order to receive the help of the church. He starts off with that, the age. It doesn't preclude anyone who's not of that age. The second thing he says is not unless she has been the wife of one man. This doesn't go to like in 1 Timothy chapter 3 when he talks about elders being having one wife. This is the same kind of terminology here. This isn't to say that they couldn't have married multiple times. That's a sister in Winfield. Maybe you can see this. I don't know. That's sister in Winfield. She had married 3 times, and all 3 of her husbands passed. She is now a widow. And her being a widow, she still is in line to receive care of the Lord's church. He is the husband of 3. She's the wife of 3 previous husbands. At the time, she had 1, and then 1, and then 1. Paul's making that point here. Someone who's actually been married before. This isn't just someone who's 60 years old, who's coming in, they kind of fit the mold of someone who's a widow, but actually someone who has been married and has done these things that he's about to mention following. He goes on, he says, the third thing that needs to be a part of his qualifications is well reported for good works. Well reported for good works that people have seen her beat a Lydia in their congregation. They've seen her be a Tabitha, a Dorcas in their congregation, someone who's full of good works, who's going about doing within the church to help the church to grow. Someone who's going to help the people of the Lord get to where they need to be spiritually and physically. As she's brought up children, she's been a mother, not literally bearing children only, but she's been a mother within the Lord's church. Those who are helping to bring up the youth in the Lord's church. She is a mother figure. If she has lodged strangers, she's hospitable. If she has washed the feet of the saints, she is a service woman. If she is someone who has relieved the afflicted, she's caring for those who are in times of need. If she has diligently followed every good work. In verses 11 through 16. That we're going to help those who are in need. We need to help those who are truly in need and who are fully invested. You know, in Galatians, I think it's a good place to put this. You know, in Galatians, when it says, do good unto all men, especially the household of faith. And we talk about being benevolent, and as a congregation, we should be benevolent. We take up an offering when people come and they have certain needs, they'll come, they'll ask about certain things, and we don't always say yes. The reason why we don't always say yes, because some needs aren't actually needs. We're not in the business of fostering bad mentality. If someone comes and they need help with a certain bill, or they need help with food, a conversation has to be had about what they plan to do after they receive this help. Because if we help them this one time and they come back next time and we didn't actually help them, we prolong the inevitable of them never getting to where they actually need to be. The same as we said about these widows. What Paul is saying here is that we need to have a good track record of who these women are and what they have done, so that we can actually get them into a better position to where they can be self-sustaining. This is the point of what Paul is saying, as Paul began to say. Look at verses 11 through 16. It says, "But refuse the younger widows, for when they had begun to grow one against Christ, they desire to marry, having condemnation because they have cast off their first faith. And besides, they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but also gossips and busybodies, saying things which they ought not. Therefore, I desire that younger widows marry, bear children, manage the house, give no opportunity to the adversary to speak reproachfully, to speak. For some have already turned aside from Satan. If any believing man or woman has widows, let them relieve them, and do not let the church be burdened, that it may relieve those who are really widows." Let's break this down. He says, "But refuse the younger widows." It's a strict contrast to what he just said. Those who are older of a certain age, those who have met all these qualifications, these are the ones in whom we need help. But those who are younger, 59 and down, those who are younger, refuse them, because in due time they're going to grow warm. They're going to have desires to be in a relationship and have that compatibility and have that comfort of someone being there with them. They're going to desire to marry. So the point that he's making here is they need to seek that out. If you think about Ruth, in the book of Ruth, you kind of see this idea here. These are all three young widows. And the idea is for these young widows to go and to seek someone to marry. Ruth's mother-in-law says, I can't marry any of our children, so you can have one for you, but you're still young enough to where you can go out and find someone. And that's exactly what she does. This is what Paul is saying. Those who are young and still able to marry, if they are desiring to have someone to help them to provide, then they can go and marry someone. They should. I'm going to make a point here at the end about this idea of the widows and why they seem to be so weak. Just hold on, and I'll explain that. They will wish the marriage time was on. They're going to want to have a life similar to what they had, because maybe it wasn't as long lived as some of those older widows. Having condemnation because they have cast off their first faith. They literally have left behind the God of whom they belong to. And I don't know if you got positives or not, but women's first responsibility, the same as men, our first responsibility is to God. So just because you've lost your husband or you lost your wife doesn't mean you've lost your God. You still are responsible to them in your service and in your life. But these are women who, because they've lost their husbands, also decided to put away doing for God. These young women are casting off their first faith. And besides that, they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house. And not only idle, but also gossips and busybodies, saying things which they ought not. I love this little passage of scripture here. They learn to be idle. They learn to literally sit still. They learn to be those who are going nowhere. Yet he goes on to say that they're going everywhere. They have learned to live a life of meaninglessness. They are learning to do nothing profitable with themselves. He goes on to say that not only are they idle, but they're wandering from house to house. I love that picture that he's painting there. The idea of them being still idle, yet they're going everywhere, yet nowhere all at the same time. They go from house to house, always on the move, yet they're speaking things that are going nowhere, being idle. They're going to gossip, they're going to be busybodies, say things they ought not say. Therefore, I desire that younger widows marry their children, manage the house, give an opportunity to the adversary to speak. He desires that younger widows marry and become mothers, bear children. I want you guys to one note the order here. One, You're gonna get married first, then you're gonna have the children, not children first, and then the marriage. He wants you to marry first, and then have children as God has ordained His order. And then He wants to have them manage the home, keep them from running from house to house, being busybodies. Okay. Paul is not saying that all women have to marry. Paul is not saying that all young widows have to marry. Paul is saying that if you have lived a life of you playing the role of a woman who is going to have a provider and you're going to fulfill your role, when you lose that provider, your role is now going to be what as you provide for yourself. Shelby works inside the home. She homeschools our kids. She takes care of the house. She does a whole lot of things that people will never see, but I'm the one who brings the money to the table. That's just it. If I were to die, now she's going to have to step into both those roles. If she is wanting for someone to step into the role that I'm playing on the side of a father and a spiritual leader and a provider for financial things, then she can seek that out. But she should not allow herself to cast off her first faith and do things that are ungodly to bring about the provisions that she needs for her family, while also asking the church to provide for her. This is the point that Paul is making. Not that women have to do these things, but if they are looking to live a certain lifestyle within the Lord's body, then they have to seek that out in a godly way. So he's telling them how to do so in a godly way. Find someone to marry, bear children, manage the house, give no opportunity to adversaries being proposed. For some have already done this. Some have already turned aside after Satan. If any believing man or woman has a widow, let them leave them, and do not let the church be burdened that it may relieve those who are relieved widows. Okay. Some people already turn aside to Satan. If you go back to 1 Timothy chapter 4, that very first section there, he talks about the apostasy of the church. You can lump this in back. In the same way that some people were following after certain doctrines, there were going to be women who would do the same after losing their husbands. They would follow after doctrines that would make them believe the church has a responsibility to them that it doesn't actually have to them. And they would do things that were ungodly. He goes on to say, if any believing man or woman has widows, let them relieve them. Literally, if there's any believing man or woman within the Lord's church, whether you are related physically or not, if you have widows that you can't take care of them, let that be the case. If you are a wealthier man or a wealthier woman taking care of these widows, that would be great, because that would relieve the church as a whole to take care of those who are truly widows. If you go back to what Paul said previously about children and grandchildren and the part they play, if you have them and you can take care of them, do that, so that those who are meeting the qualifications of verses 9 and 10 can be cared for by the church. He's going to stick to it. And he's going to have a small shift from talking about widows to now talking about the elders. But even though he shifts from talking about the widows to talking about the elders, he's having the same conversation. And the conversation that we actually have been having has been not about the widows and not even really about the elders. This whole conversation has been about how we're to properly use the church's money. All of 1 Timothy chapter 5 is all about being good stewards of the bank account, the treasury of the brethren. So he talks about if you're going to do anything with the Lord's money, well, let it be that you're doing a good thing by taking care of the household of faith, in specific, the widows. Then he goes on to say, if you're going to do anything to the benefit of the church, and you're going to use the Lord's money, then let it be that you're doing so to aid the elders. Take a look at how he frames this. Look at verses 17 and 18. No, verses 17 and 18 first. It says, let the children who rule well be counted worthy of the noble honor, especially let the elders who rule well be counted of a noble honor, be counted worthy of noble honor, especially those who labor in the Lord and doctrine. For the scripture says, you shall not muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain, and the laborer is worthy of his wages. So let the elders who rule well be counted of a noble honor. The reason why they're going to be counted of a noble honor is because they're going to be doing double duty. They're going to be those who are preaching, but also serving as an elder. We know people who do that. It happens all the time. They stand in the pulpit every Sunday morning. This is their job, and they also are serving the church as an elder. They may also too have an outside job. He goes on to address that. These are elders who are able to teach. They're not simply able to teach, but they're engaging in full-time ministry. They are deserving of their wage. He then says, for the scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain, and the laborer is worthy of their wage. We see this, of course, in Deuteronomy 25, verse 4. You shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. And then you also see it in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 9. 1 Corinthians 9, verse 9 is the same, for it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. These verses are talking about paying people. When an ox is out in the field and he's doing all this hard work for you, you're going to let him breathe freely. You're going to let him eat what he wants to eat. You're going to let him be able to take in what he has earned. Is the point that it's making. Here, 1 Timothy chapter 5 is saying it is possible for the Lord's church to provide supplemental income to the elders, then you should do that. The reason why is it's going to free up their time. Our elders both work full-time jobs, and sometimes they have their jobs that they have to go to, and then they have to also manage the church. If we were able to provide them supplemental income where they could work less and they could work more in the community, that's what they do. Also, if we're truly trying to allow for the church to grow, then the ones who are overseeing the church here on this earth, followers should be able to have enough free time to do that. So as you have the ability, help them to be able to do that freely. In Matthew chapter 10, we see some references that are similar to this. In Matthew 10 and verse 10, he says, nor a bag for your journey, nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor staff, for a worker is worthy of his food. When you are doing the work, God is going to provide. And the way that God is going to provide sometimes maybe through the bread. He goes on in Luke chapter 10 and verse 7, he says, remain in the same house, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his wage. Do not go from house to house. When you see your preachers, when you see your elders, when you see your Bible class teachers, when you see them working so hard and so diligently and trying to balance the physical side of life, the spiritual side of life, and trying to balance the work that they do outside of the church and the work that they're doing within the church, when you see them struggling with the finances, there is a way for us to help aid them so their focus can be on the spiritual things that worthy of the wage. Go to chapter 5, verse 19 and 20. Chapter 5, verse 19 and 20. I know the Bible for so many, we don't like the idea of hiring a song leader or hiring Bible class teachers or hiring elders, so to say. This isn't to say that these people are going to be unqualified because they're receiving a wage. In the same way that you hire a preacher, all those other places can be paid as well to a degree, so that their focus can be on the job that they're doing in service to the church. Paul is laying that out for us here in 1 Timothy chapter 5. Look at verses 19 and 20. He goes on and he says, do not receive an accusation against an elder except from 2 or 3 witnesses, those who are sinning rebuke in the presence of all, that the rest also may fear. Do not receive an accusation against an elder except for 2 or 3 witnesses. Literally, if you have an accusation against one of our elders, not that they can't do any wrong, but be sure as to what you're about to say. The question isn't a matter of fact that if you haven't heard or you have an accusation against them and then you find 2 or 3 more to go and confirm what you're about to say, but that you have 2 or 3 more people who've heard or seen the same, who can all say the same thing about this elder, that it truly is a problem. This elder, this elder's wife, the elder together, the eldership. He goes on, he says, those who are sinning rebuke in the presence of all, that the rest may also fear. It sounds a lot like Matthew chapter 18 and verse 15 and following. Taking those steps to disfellowship from those who are not fulfilling the law of Christ. 21 and 22. Do not lay hands hastily. Verses 21 and 22. I charge you before God and the Lord Jesus Christ and the elect angels that you observe these things without prejudice, doing nothing with partiality. Do not lay hands on anyone hastily, nor share in other sins. Keep yourself pure and mean. This is this is, in my opinion, the most important verse in all of what we read in chapter 5. Let's start at the top. I charge you before God and the Lord and the angels elect to observe these things without prejudice, doing nothing in partiality. In order for him to be an example to the believers, chapter 4, verse 12, in order for him to exercise himself towards godliness, 1 Timothy 4, verse 8, and in order for him to have it be profitable with all things, he has to be someone who's applying these things across the board. He has to be someone who's going to take that charge that he's given in 1 Timothy chapter 1 and apply it to the elders all the way down to the babes in Christ. He has to be someone who's able to give this to any and every person without partiality, to the young women, to the older women, to the young men, to the older men, as he addresses at the beginning of this chapter. He has to be able to do this without prejudice and without partiality. He has to be able to go to those who are Jews by birth and those who are Gentiles. He has to be able to go to those who are Scythians and barbarians. He has to be able to do this without prejudice. Are we picking up on this? In 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 9 through 11, he talks about those who are committing all of these sins and how horrible they are. And then verse 15, Paul says, this is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptance, that I am the chief of sinners. God came into this world, Jesus came into this world to save all sinners, of whom I am the chief. He says you need to be able to go and preach and teach these people without partiality, without prejudice. You need to be able to go to the elders when they have done wrong and correct them in the right way, without partiality or prejudice. Not showing them partiality because of their authority, because of the title that they hold. Be able to correct the preacher, even though he's the preacher. You need to be able to do these things without partiality. Without prejudice literally means with absolute fairness. He's charging him these things before the angels. In Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 14, it says, are they not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister to those who will inherit salvation? He says, do not lay hands on anyone hastily, nor share other people's sins. Keep yourself here. This is the most important verse in all of chapter 5. Do not lay hands on anyone hastily literally means do not go and make anyone an elder hastily. If you've ever wondered how the first elders were ever established, it was done by preachers. You see Peter doing this. You see him going in and preaching and teaching about it. You see Paul doing the same. I know we're thinking, well, they're apostles. Yeah, true enough, they are apostles, but they are preachers. And then you see Paul, the apostle, a preacher, talking to a young preacher in Titus and in Timothy and telling them that you are going to be the ones who are going to go and give these qualifications to the qualified men and women who will serve in the eldership, the husband and wife, and then also the same to be deacons. But do not do this hastily. Make sure that these people are qualified. Make sure that you properly invest them. Make sure that you uphold all that I told you back in chapter 3. Don't rush to ordain this anyone to be a part of this eldership. This is the important part. Nor share in other people's sins. Apply to the immediate context. If you're going to take a man who doesn't meet the qualifications of 1 Timothy chapter 3 and make them an elder, all that they do following that ordaining of their eldership now is going to lay on you as well. Because you didn't properly do your job in vetting them and making sure that they were upholding the truth. But let's apply it more broadly. Every time that we don't correct those who are in sin, we're okay with their behavior. This isn't to say that every single time we see someone in sin that we have to be like, hey, that's a sin. But we should urge them to not do that. We should gently remind them that there's a better standard that they should be following. We should make it known that we don't agree. Every moment doesn't have to be a let me teach you a sermon kind of moment, but every moment should be a moment of let me show you how we can do better. Maybe we do this through the verbal communication, maybe we do this through our conduct, but nonetheless, it should be known to other people when we don't agree of sinful things being done. The reason why we want to do this is so that we can keep ourselves pure. Those who are still going to obtain and have heaven at the end, we're not trying to lose our salvation for anyone's sake. So we are not going to share in other people's sins. If friends want to go out and do things sinful, stay behind. When your family wants to go out and do things sinful, stay behind. Whenever your spouse wants to do something sinful, stay behind. You don't have to engage in other people. You don't share in those things. We want to share the salvation with God. Verse 23. No longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake in your frequent infirmities. A long conversation about alcohol we started about this particular verse. Someone implied that, well, since he's having to tell him to take a little bit of wine for his stomach, that means that he's abstained from it for a very long time. Others will say that, well, he is telling him to have alcoholic wine, so if him telling him to do that, he's okay in drinking. Others will say, well, he's telling him that he can have it as a means of medicinal purposes. Read it for what it is. Paul is saying that you can have this, say, go sell it, something, Timothy was someone who did not, you know, that did not mean that Paul is saying that you never had to begin. Second thing is, if we're going to be those who are staying in every appearance of evil, you're telling me that Paul is going to instruct Timothy or his mother and grandmother to go out and buy wine in the marketplace. If just bear with me here, if the consumption of alcohol in every aspect is going to be something that's sinful, the question to be asked is, why would Paul ever suggest that it's used for any means? No other way to settle the stomach of this young man than to have a drink of this wine. Verse 20. Some men's sins are clearly evident, preceding them in judgment, but those of some men follow later. Sometimes it's going to be easy to point out those who are not bearing good fruits, and other times it's going to be hard to decipher what they've done wrong. Sometimes a preacher will stand up pulpit for years on end before they let it slip how unfaithful they truly are. But once they crack it, people can really expose what they've done and said wrong for all the years past. Sometimes it's clearly seen, sometimes it's harder. Verse 25 says, likewise, the good works of some are clearly evident, and those that are otherwise cannot be hidden. This should be us. Don't let it be a secret of the good works that we're doing. And the main reason why it should be a secret that we're doing these good works is because if people are seeing our good works, we're glorifying our Father in heaven. Let me just make it clear here. Just because people see your good works doesn't mean that they see you. Matthew 5, verse 17, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. That's no pat on your back because we're not doing it for that. We're doing it for Matthew, 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 58. Be steadfast and will always abounding in the works of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain. That's why we do it. Knowing that our labor is not in vain. 1 Timothy chapter 5. As I've said multiple times throughout this series, I know this is not one of those sermons that make you go, man, I can't wait to be baptized, or oh, I need to repent of my sins. But nonetheless, every sermon is a come to Jesus sermon if you want to frame it in the right way. Throughout this chapter, Paul is going to tell us, don't rebuke those who are older. The way that you treat them and respect them is going to matter because that's the way that God would have you to do it. Treat them in a gentle, loving, kind way. Honor those who are truly widows. Take care of them out of the treasury. Make sure that they have their needs being met, but make sure that they truly are in need of these things. And those who can be provided for in other means, that they are provided for in those other means. And then honor widows, honor elders. In the same way that we are taking care of our widows or anyone within the Lord's church, also take care of our elders so that they can do their job with an easier pattern. At the end of it all, let it be that you don't share in other people's sins and you keep yourself pure. You leave this building not remembering anything else. Do not share anybody else's sins. When someone today confronts you and they bring a bad attitude, don't share in that sin by amplifying that situation. Take a step back and keep yourself pure. And today, whenever you and your spouse are getting into a little bit of a tiff, and it's going to escalate to something more, take a step back from that and see how this could be very beneficial to your godliness, to your salvation, and keep yourself pure. When it comes to you kids going back to school and your friends are wanting to go and do something that you know you should not do, take a step back from that and keep yourself pure. If you have any need here this morning, there's a put on Christ like baptism. There is to repent of past sins, make yourself pure once again. There is to ask for the praise of the congregation. Make that known as we stand and as we speak.
That you've been to Jesus for the faithful God, you are in the soul, and in love. Father God, Father, Father, life, Father, was in the blood. And we lost in the blood. Oh, we lost in the blood. Well, me in prayer. Father, we're so grateful that you gave us yet another opportunity to come together as like-minded and worship you. Partake of your son with the same encouragement and others to know more about you. Father, as we get ready to leave, please help us to be doers of the word, not just hearers like that. Others may see you through us, and perhaps want to have a relationship with you. Please forgive us of our sin and us save transgressions. In Jesus' name, we ask that you pray.